What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another review. This time we're taking a look at Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, the fourth and very divided movie into the Indiana Jones franchise. Now, I'm going to give my fair and biased opinion on this movie. It'll illustrate what I like and what I didn't like, and just tell you how I feel. So, without further ado, let's get right into it. The story of the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull takes place 20 years after the events of the Last Crusade. So now we're following Indy Jones, who is well into his 60s. Marcus and Henry Jones Sr. have since passed on, and I like how Spielberg and George Lucas were able to craft a story that focuses on an older Indiana Jones who is getting close to pretty much, hanging up the bull rope, hanging up the fedora, in a way. This Indiana Jones is weathered. He's, his knack for adventure is fading. Is not, I wouldn't say fading, but he's not as agile as he used to be. And I like Harrison Ford as a much more older, warier Indiana Jones who's accepting his mortality in a way. So I kind of like that aspect of the movie of dealing with an older Indiana Jones. And Harrison Ford's performance all throughout the movie is great. Another thing that's great about this movie is this movie brings back the return of Marion Ravenwood, played by Karen Allen. And right off the bat, that's an instant plus for me because I love the character of Marion Ravenwood in the first movie, and I think that Temple of Doom and The Last Crusade could have used her character to come back. Maybe more in Temple of Doom, maybe more so for the Temple of Doom, because the character really was abysmal, and for The Last Crusade, more along the lines of in the prologue, dealing with the young Indiana. But her character returns in this movie, and she is a welcome return to this movie. And because her character has not been seen since the first movie, she kind of gives it like a breath of fresh air, like some new life. Like, this is the love interest that Indiana Jones should be with, because Ford and Allen have an unmatched chemistry with one another. They are perfect with one another. Marion Ravenwood and Indiana Jones, their personalities mesh with one another. Indiana Jones does things his own way. Marion Ravenwood does things her own way, and she's not intimidated by Indiana Jones and not afraid to get up in his face whenever he does something foolish. That's why these two are meant for one another, and the chemistry between Ford and Allen. It's almost as if these two had not missed a beat. These two are fantastic in their scenes together. They are great. And to me, once Marion comes in the second half of this movie, that's where this movie, to me, really starts to pick up steam and really starts to feel like the first movie again. To me, at least. I mean, the first half of this movie is okay. Indy's introduced to Mutt Williams, played by Shia LaBeouf, and I know Shia LaBeouf gets a lot of shit as an actor, and there are a lot of movies he's in or he is not good. But I actually was not bothered by his performance in this movie. I thought he was okay as Mutt Williams. It's clear that Harrison Ford is carrying the scenes with him and Shia LaBeouf. But to LaBeouf's credit, it does take two to tango, and he's holding his own. And I buy and accept the fact that he's basically Indiana Jones' son. It's revealed that he's the son of Indiana and Marion. So I buy it. It doesn't bother me. It doesn't bother me at all. If anything, this fourth movie should be about passing on to the next generation. And the next logical step is to pass on to the son of Indiana Jones. And again, I thought Shia LaBeouf did fine for what it was. His performance wasn't earth-shattering or great, and you could have gotten a much better actor to play the role, but I thought Shia LaBeouf did fine. The character of Ray Winstone, name is Mac, who is a friend of Indiana Jones. I like the character of Mac when this movie first starts, seeing Indiana Jones and Mac as a team. But then, to me, this movie made the mistake by having Mac become a double agent, and then this movie just does a lot of bait and switching with Mac, to the point where he has to feign being a triple agent. And I'm like, what direction are you trying to take this Mac character in? He's either a double agent, he's a triple agent, is he a quadruple agent? Like, what's the deal with Mac? He has more heel and babyface turns than the Big Show does, and I don't like it because I thought Ray Winstone and Harrison Ford in that scene that they were together, they had some good bantering with one another. I felt a sense of history between the two, and I would have liked to see more of that camaraderie develop with Mac and Indiana Jones being a new duo in a way, kind of akin to how Indiana and Solo were in Raiders of the Lost Ark. And I thought you could have done something much newer with Mac and Indy, but instead the movie does not go that direction, and I don't like that at all because I think the character of Mac had some potential to him, and I didn't like the constant switching of allegiances that he does, and the duplicity of his character and the duplistic nature of his character. I mean, I would have kept that in a way of having Mac and Indy trick the Soviets into having Mac join the Soviets to get intel on the Soviets. I mean, I would have done that instead of having Mac just turn to become a bad guy, and then become a good guy just to be a bad guy again. That stuff I thought was terrible. But to Ray Winstone's credit, he's not terrible in the movie. I like him. John Hurt is also introduced in this movie. He plays a character called Oxley, and John Hurt, he pretty much plays a character who goes completely crazy by the Crystal Skull. And I like John Hurt. I thought his performance was actually really, really humorous. So that's fine. Kate Blanchett plays the villain called Splanco, who is a Russian scientist. She's not that interesting. She's kind of the character, that is. The character's kind of bland, though Blanchett does her best to try and make it work and be memorable, but it just doesn't work for me. I don't know what it is with Indiana Jones villains. They just don't stand out to me. And I'm going to say it again. Belloc is the perfect Indiana Jones villain, and Mola Ram is the second best Indiana Jones villain. Donovan and Splanco, they are the weakest and the poorest villains in the Indiana Jones franchise. Mainly because there's nothing really to them. I don't feel anything. Donovan just was an evil businessman, and Splanco is just a Russian spy. That's pretty much it. She's just a Russian spy. I feel nothing, and I don't like it. And nothing against Kate Blanchett. She's doing her best, but the character is just written really weakly, written really poorly, and I don't really feel a threat coming from her, which is a shame because Kate Blanchett, like I said, she was a talented actress, and if this character had more personality and actually had more of a connection with Indiana Jones, I would have felt more for Indiana, but instead I don't really get much out of it. The overall story for this movie, listen, this movie is an homage to the 1950s and the old sci-fi age that took place in the 50s. So Indiana Jones going to find artifacts based on alien culture is the next logical step. Let's be real, the Indiana Jones movies, they're not based in any reality. These are fantasy adventure movies. There's no such thing as an ark that has these spirits that will engulf you into flames. There's no such thing of a holy grail giving you eternal life. And there's damn sure no such thing of an Indian cult that rips out your heart and then you're perfectly fine and breathing and acting all normal. These are movies that are fantasy, and they're meant to be silly and goofy, but the characters are meant to be as grounded and real as possible to sell the story and make it feel real enough to the point where you're not scratching your head being like, yo, this is kind of fucking stupid. So, yeah, the whole alien storyline, it is what it is. This movie didn't really do anything to make the alien storyline remotely interesting, to me at least. I mean, if you're going to do the alien thing, at least be creative with it. I think Spielberg and Lucas took a more pedestrian way with the alien storyline, where it just comes across as just there, as something for Indiana Jones to do, while they focused on the strengths of this movie, which is the character relationships, and they just had this alien thing as a way to have exciting action sequences, which this movie does have. The action sequences in this movie are really entertaining, and they are really well done. The use of practical effects are great. Some of the CGI is good too, though I think this movie has a little too heavy reliance on CGI, which is a big flaw because the Indiana Jones movies were all about practical effects and looking as real as possible. Now I get it, Harrison Ford is not a spring chicken, but the man at 64 years old can still do his own stunts and be relatively fine. And you could have done some more location shooting to make this movie feel a little bit more realistic and not very cartoony in a lot of areas. Though that's just how I feel. That's just what I think personally. And now we get to the whole controversy of, Indiana Jones survived the nuclear blast by a refrigerator. go back to my point for what I said earlier. The Indiana Jones movies are meant to be entertaining and goofy. They're not meant to be taken seriously. So Indiana Jones surviving a nuclear blast in the fridge, hey, listen, it is what it is. It does not hurt the movie because I think this movie has much more problems to worry about than a refrigerator. And some of the problems that this movie does have for me is the storyline is lacking any real creativity, especially with the alien storyline, which is just there. It doesn't do anything for me at all. It's weak. The villain is weak, though I do like how they updated to the Russians, since this movie does take place in the late 50s, early 60s during the whole Cold War. So I like that they updated, but the lead villain is weak. The story, for the most part, is weak. Some of this movie does have good character, has good character moments, and like I said, I think the first half of this movie is relatively weak. But once Marion gets introduced, that's where the movie really starts to pick up steam and really starts to get entertaining to me at least. And again, some of the characters are really mishandled, like the character of Mac. And that's pretty much all I got to say about Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. If anything, I'm going to give this movie a 6.5 out of 10. I think it's entertaining. It's not bad by any stretch of the imagination. It's still really well acted. It's well made. Steven Spielberg can't make a bad movie if he tried. But when you compare it to the original 3 movies, it's lacking something. And that something that is lacking is a good, strong story and a good villain that comes across as a legitimate threat. The first movie had a great villain. The second movie had a good villain on paper who was threatening, but I would have liked to have had more of a personal connection with him. The third movie had a weak villain, but it had things that outshined the weak villain. This movie has a few things, and that's pretty much it. But again, it's watchable. I enjoyed it. I didn't hate it like most people do. And it does continue on the story, and it does hint at the possibility of passing on the fedora to the new generation. And that's what this fourth movie should have been about. This fourth movie should be Indiana Jones' last adventure before passing on his fedora to the new generation, that being of his son. So yeah, a 6.5 out of 10 for Indiana Jones, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Let me know your thoughts in the comment sections down below. Like the video and subscribe, and I'll check you back next time for more.